to order.
You have to do it louder, Charlie. They're not listening.
Louder.
They're not listening. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. We'll go over the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. The consent agenda consists of multiple items that are from the previous workshop meeting minutes, special city council meetings, closed session meetings from April to May. It includes items 1 through 10, so there's multiple meetings that occurred during that time. I'm not going to go through all of them, so you'll see 1 through actual number 10 is just the meeting minutes that have occurred. Item number 11 on consent is an approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages for the 2023 Soundtracks Music Festival. And that is the music festival that's going to be held on September 30th, where the Marshall Tucker Band will be playing at Stowe Park. And so inside of this ordinance, it shows that the area for designation is the upper field at behind the old middle school. So you can see it's designated in the key. It's got the alcohol consumption area, the entrance exits, the alcohol sales area, and then the area designated for live music. In here, it also states that the city will be providing in-kind services for the public works staff and Belmont Police staff and other staff as required to maintain this event. And it also ordains that the city authorizes live music to be performed between the hours of 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturday, September 30th. The next item in consent is item number 12. Item number 12 consists of a proclamation recognizing the National Pollinator Week in Belmont, given that the city of Belmont is a bee city. And that National Pollinator Week is from June the 19th through the 25th. And it urges all citizens to participate in community activities that support and celebrate pollinator protection. That's item number 12 on consent. And then the final item, I believe, on consent, item number 13, is the resolution approving the installment financing contract for the Belmont Recreation Center. Last Tuesday, the local government commission approved the debt approval. And so this is an $11,700,000 installment financing contract. That's a not to exceed price with JP Morgan Chase Bank. And so there is a resolution for approval, and we anticipate to close on this loan tomorrow. So this is just a formality that we have to abide by to move through that process. And I'll entertain any questions or comments. Consent.
Do you have any questions?
Nope.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
The next item would be for you to call to order the meeting.
Call the meeting to order and invocation. Jim Hepper. Martha, Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings that you've bestowed on our city, and we ask that you provide us with the guidance and wisdom to make decisions for the best interests of the city and its citizens here tonight. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Jim, you want to set the agenda?
Do we have some recognitions and acknowledgments first? Or okay, then I will move to set the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
I would also move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Then the agenda is approved. Public comment.
I have that for you, Mayor.
Thank you, Corky. All right. First person we have signed up is Kenny Smith. State your name and address. And you got 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Kenny Smith. I'm a 45-year resident of Belmont, and I'm gonna let Skip talk for me because he's got all the information. It's for about Friday Night Live.
Okay.
Members of the council, appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Skip Graham. Been in business in Belmont for over 30 plus years. And we helped start or initiate Friday Night Live through the Belmont Merchants Association years and years ago. So anyhow, it's progressed and bloomed and doing well. But one thing we're not doing so well in is a hard surface or a dance floor since we've moved to the park area. Every other small town that has these events, they have a hard surface so folks can have a good time and participate. So what I'd like to do is propose something for the city council to take a look at and take a vote on for a concrete pad up in that park area that can be used for presentations when there are events in the upper area of the park. The stage is about 30 feet wide, and if we had a pad approximately 30 feet wide going into the park 40 feet, or 30 feet wide going into the park 50 feet. So I've got 2 proposals. I've done a little legwork for you. Pass that down, take a peek. And I think with that to the event, the Friday Night Live venue, just that venue and any other thing you might have at the park, because it'd be a good solid surface to do presentations from. And it's cost effective, and I think it would be something great for the city that we've been missing since we moved up to the park with the venue. And it's a safety issue also. And I've got a video clip, I can't show it, of the folks having a good time. So they bring their families, they bring the kids. When the music starts, they have a good time. So.
I will, even in the absence of the video, I will stipulate to folks having a good time.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
Are there any questions at all about what we're talking about? Simple concrete pad. I've talked to the contractors, and of course, I'll have to fine tune it, but the price is approximate.
Sure.
The bids. So I'm sure the city can do better than we can, and it's local. They're local people, so the bids are local.
Sure.
That's it.
Thank you, Skip.
Anything else?
Appreciate that.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can get that on the agenda maybe, and I'd be happy to follow up.
Okay.
Hey, Miles, just maybe a comment. I know we can't speak directly to the public comment itself, but could we have, I think we had mentioned previously having Parks and Rec looking into this about potentially an amphitheater type of design in that area for Stowe Park above the field. So I can't remember where we were with that, or if that was ever, with all the transition, if that was ever asked at Parks and Rec to look into that.
Okay, we'll look into it. Yes, sir.
I think that pad could serve as a good basis point, whether you have an amphitheater or not. It could be a good starting point to go further with.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Skip. Appreciate it.
You bet.
You want to see that?
Next, we have to speak Matthew Hart. What's that, Matt?
Matt Hart, 2519 Cheddar Drive. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'd like to note that I'm here on behalf of the City of Belmont Planning and Zoning Board as its current chairman to provide a brief in-person update that supports the minutes provided in your packet from our May 18th meeting. At that meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board was presented with 2 options by staff to accommodate senior and supportive housing that would fall into the apartment building form. However, on January 9th, this building form was abolished except within the Wilkinson corridor through text amendment 2022.05 by the City Council. As a reminder, your planning board recommended unanimously that this text amendment is inconsistent with the goals of the adopted comprehensive land use plan, and that this text amendment is inconsistent because it does not promote choice in housing. We also voted unanimously that this is not a reasonable request and in the public interest for numerous reasons, a few being that the removal of the apartment building form can limit housing choice and can affect the affordability of housing within the city, and another, written verbatim from the ordinance, to amend the land development code, I quote, "The proposed text amendment limits support for future development plans and submissions that may offer benefits to the city or ones we may want to consider, such as specifically senior living or affordable housing projects." So it seems as though your Planning and Zoning Board is now being asked to reconsider just a portion of this text amendment to accommodate unintended consequences of the original text of text amendment 2022.05. As mentioned in the meeting minutes located within your packet, your Planning and Zoning Board reaffirms our belief to increase, not reduce, housing types within the city, and have voted unanimously to ask that you rescind the text amendment that eliminated the apartment building form until further vetting of the unintended implications can be completed. Your Planning and Zoning Board is here to provide technical expertise and professional opinion as it relates to the Land Development Code. We have shared our joint interest in developing a land development code that accommodates a myriad of apartment building forms and other housing choices, and have no interest in supporting text amendments that abolish and limit housing choice. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. All right, next we have signed up Marie Turner. Hey.
Good evening. I'm Marie Turner. I'm a 315 Dogwood Lane here in Belmont, and I've been on Keep Belmont Beautiful for over 13 years, volunteered for everything in Belmont for years and years, and I really have a passion around this group and what they do and everything that they've done for all the time that they've been around. They've had great leadership from so many people. We really love this group, and they do a lot for our town. Some of you may see it from the times that you see cleanups. You see them cleaning out cigarette butts, planting flower beds, volunteering at the schools. They've given $13,000 plus to the different schools over the years, and they do a lot for the groups. Recently, we have had some turnover, and we'd like to approach the council for looking at possibly coming to bring some leadership, guidance, or oversight, maybe with someone on the city or an associate in the city already, or something to that nature. We would still absolutely need all the volunteers that we have. It's getting harder and harder to find volunteers, dedicated volunteers who give time. You have a lot of them here right now who support this, have been here forever, have already, volunteered to stay on and keep going. But we think we need the city to step up. As you think about it, Gastonia already has some full-time associates that help with this type of role. We think the city needs to consider that also. And I know that in your packets tonight, you have an agenda topic to talk about this. So I hope you'll take that under consideration. And I'd really like to thank all the volunteers who come in here and help every single day. So thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next we have Brian Burns. Say your address too, Brian.
Good evening. My name is Brian Burns. I'm chairman of the Belmont ABC Board, 240 Hawthorne Park Avenue. It is my honor again to show up quarterly and present a check for $38,787.90. This is our third quarter distribution, and who gets it?
I'll take that.
Good to me.
Miles, I'm Brian Burns.
Hey, nice to meet you, sir.
See you tomorrow.
Yep, that's right. Thank you.
A good size check, isn't it?
And with that, is there any questions? All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you in another quarter.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Brian.
you.
That was good. Okay. That's all we have up on the sign-up sheets for public comment. Next, we have Keep Belmont Beautiful discussion, public hearing on that.
Well, I don't think it's a public
No, there's no
hearing.
public
Just discussion.
It's just a discussion.
Well, it says public hearing.
That's for the next item.
Yeah, it's right.
That's for the next item. Item
Okay.
4.
Discussion.
Yes,
Well, we're gonna hear you,
yes.
so, you know.
And it's in public.
You ready, Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this was an item brought up at the last month's Keep Belmont Beautiful Board meeting. I am the city staff's representative on the board. I'm a non-voting member, so I'm there to provide guidance, feedback on everything public works related to Keep Belmont Beautiful, and we work closely with them and the organization and trying to make it a organization that's viable and doing a great benefit to the city. So this organization, of course, does a great thing for the city. Coordinate volunteers, help us to weed our flower beds downtown, gives us guidance and feedback on what types of flowers, what projects we need to accomplish to have a beautiful city, as well as the litter pickups and coordinate those volunteering efforts as well, among other things. That's just a few things that they do. It's definitely a great organization that the city has the ability to work with, and they voted to bring forward to you, at least to talk about potential of having a full-time representative for Keep Belmont Beautiful. Currently, we fund a part-time position. Recently, Wendy Coughlin, who was a part-time administrator in that position, she left for personal reasons. She did a great job for us, but our fear is with the current job market as it is, and with attracting talent, it's tough to attract part-time talent and get somebody who's going to be efficient and effective. On top of that, a lot of the roles and responsibilities for this board have grown, and you're more than welcome to talk to Ms. Susan Wall, who has chaired the board for the past couple years, or Ms. Judy Clausen, who chaired it for probably 20 years before that, and kind of see the workload that they put into it. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of the people who are volunteering for the board just don't have that kind of time to dedicate, unfortunately. So having a full-time representative at the city would allow them to have better coordination and be able to kind of guide those volunteering efforts and guide the board in a direction. On top of that, my thought with this is to kind of utilize any additional position, obviously, because there will be slow times. Keep Belmont Beautiful slows down the summer a little bit. Would be to utilize those times for other work duties, such as helping with yard waste calls, helping with sanitation and waste pro calls. So pretty much all things beautification, sanitation, yard waste, to kind of get this an all-encompassing role that's going to help those administrative duties when it comes to keeping Belmont beautiful. So this is really just a discussion topic. If the council is interested in this position, I'll be happy to draft and do some research on a job description, the pay grade. I do have a rough estimate included on there. Of course, that would be determinant on kind of the market. That's just what I was thinking, just with some preliminary research and based on what we were paying our previous employees in that role. So I welcome any questions you have for me, but ultimately it's really to get some guidance from the council to see if this is an interest they have or not.
Yeah. Bill, do you have anybody in line?
Not currently.
No.
Do
Not
not.
currently?
We got to
No, we
create
don't
the
have the
position
job
first.
description.
Yeah.
Or
So
budget.
right now we have a part-time position that is funded.
Yeah.
We have not posted that because I wanted to make sure we got kind of guidance from the council before we attempted to go get another part-time person. I will say when we were trying to hire a couple years ago, or no, a year and a half ago for a part-time, it was a challenge. It took about 4 months to get 3 applicants.
Wow.
So it's just a tough job because it's part-time. Pay is not, out the roof. I mean, it's decent, but a lot of people are attracted more to that full-time work nowadays.
Yeah.
So
And-
it's my understanding that right now the chairman is retiring.
That's correct.
Okay,
At the end of the month.
My understanding is also that no one wants to actually assume that role at this time.
I don't have a name to give you about that. There was some interest in the board meeting. Not specific interest, but there was interest that if the position was funded and they had that staff support full-time, that there potentially would be interest, but no one, to my knowledge, has stepped up to be the chair.
No one wants to be the chair in absence of that position.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding, at least from what I took from the board meeting we had last month.
To add to the discussion, since I'm the liaison from the council, Keep Belmont Beautiful has taken on more and more responsibility over the years. It used to be that they weeded the flower beds right on Main Street. Then we extended that north, and now we've extended it into the River District. So you have even that taking a huge amount of time. The Flower Power group that Susan Wall set up has over 30 volunteers, but you're going to need somebody to coordinate those. One of the things, as Susan Wall and I discussed this, is that there are several possibilities. If we want to have Bill go ahead and put that job description together, I think that'd be excellent, and let us look at it. We're not deciding anything tonight. The other part of it might be, and with Miles and Kevin and Bill looking at it, maybe you want to mesh this into the Environmental Sustainability Board. But one of the main issues is that if you look at our downtown Main Street situation, we have 3 staff people who are coordinating, and you can have somebody there to answer questions. That facilitates your volunteer piece of it, and we just don't have that. So if we had that part of it, I think you'd see even more volunteers. But I think that those 3 people, Kevin, Miles, and Bill, need to look at that and report back to us as to what they think the best option is. It's going to cost us either way. Either you're going to have a public works employee that has to take over what he or she can from what Keep Belmont Beautiful has done, or you're going to have to figure out another option. If, in fact, we choose to dissolve Keep Belmont Beautiful, which is not my first choice, then we'd have to figure out how to take the monies from the 501c3 we have and have parks look at. I think we talked about you can possibly transfer it to our nonprofit with the DBDA. So there's some pieces of it that need to be worked out if we make a choice to dissolve that. And Keep Gastonia Beautiful has 6 full-time employees. Marie is our person to keep the Yard of the Month. If you look at that, all through the summer we have Yard of the Month, Business of the Month. All of those kind of things are quality of life issues. But the piece of it that's going to make the difference to us as a council is the work that is not going to be accomplished, because you and I are, most of us, working full time. We don't see those people there during the day weeding those beds. And it's a huge group of people. And all the people on the board have been there for a number of years. But to take on what is more responsibility now is everybody's hesitant, because we don't have somebody from the city as the coordinator part of it. So it's not just having somebody like Wendy and doing it. She did an excellent job, and she did more than what we had asked her to do. But Bill is correct. You're not going to find the type of person we want as a part-time person. Okay, questions that you have of him on me? Because I think we've been involved more than anyone else.
I'd certainly want to work on the job description to make sure that if to the extent that KBB is not a full-time year-round generator of work, that I know there have been requests for additional customer service specialists, and I know that sometimes the phone network here can be somewhat labyrinthine, so that would certainly help. I mean, you might not like what I'm about to say, but I had talked, and I didn't realize that this was something that we could sort of just discuss and decide on finally down the line. I'd sort of proposed as a compromise to take one of the 2 maintenance tech positions and say you get 1 maintenance tech and then this KBB customer service hybrid. Those are the 2 positions, so that we're not adding a net position, because certainly we also are concerned with growing the administrative state, and we want to make sure that if jobs are created, that there's a full-time rationale for them. So that is what I had spoken with some of you all about, was maybe saying, because I agree with what Martha and Richard have said. I think it's important, and it's the kind of thing that you don't notice until it's gone. Mm-hmm. You don't see them doing a lot of the stuff, but if they were to stop doing it, I think everyone would notice that.
You get the calls. And I will say that I think it's a fine point. I also believe that having the additional administrative help, I think most of you will probably talk to Crystal on the phone at some point.
Yes.
Whether you're requesting yard waste or not, getting some of that workload off her so she can handle on administrative tasks and delegating other work duties in her utility department. I think trading out that tech position for an administrative position actually is going to help with workload out in the field, because they're going to be better to dispatch and assign that work. because you have somebody that's an administrator doing that and receiving those calls. So it actually could offset some of the work needed there, and also help with exploring other alternatives for workflow and making things more efficient and effective as well.
So you're open to that
Of course.
resolution?
Absolutely, I think so.
Yeah, Jim floated this idea by me earlier, and I thought that was kind of a good idea. Because I mean, like you said, once the flowers start dying, the weeds start coming up. People are going to notice that, and I think that it's one of those things. Stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. I think that it's important so long as the organization is viable, that we continue to support it. And I like getting the idea of getting it in the budget now, because then you can go ahead and start working on the job description and posting it, and because it sounds like the need is fairly immediate from what I'm hearing.
I mean, they do slow down. They don't meet as much in the summer due to the heat and everything. But certainly by fall, we want to make sure we've got a clear direction about where the city council wants to take that forward and help that board out.
We need to let that group know, because although the meetings aren't happening, this is the time when the people are weeding the flower beds. So if we don't see a way forward, or they don't see that we're really headed a certain direction, that's going to make that tricky too.
And we're lucky that we still have, I won't put work on them, but Susan and Judy still live in town, so I can give them a call.
Well, Jim floated this by me, and I was open to it. And if you have no resistance to it, then I think we may have identified a pathway forward.
Okay.
One thing I do want to point out is this is not budgeted in this next fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
So the addition of that, going from the part-time to the full-time staff member, is not budgeted. So what staff was thinking that we would do is, prepare that job description, and then consider if there's any kind of salary lag. If we had, 179 positions on July 1st, there's probably 3 or 4 that are out there right now that won't be filled for a period of time. So if there's any salary lag, maybe we could take some of that to fund the extra, or we could consider a budget amendment at some point during the next fiscal year, once we get that person, if that's the way we're moving forward.
That sounds good.
Assigned to it.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Okay.
I guess that's it then.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. All right, next we have
Next item is
capture of the budget,
budget public hearing and
budget
presentation.
public hearing and presentation.
Yep.
Move to go into public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move.
So Kevin and the financial staff has done a great job to prepare the budget, and I'm not going to take credit for it because Kevin put a lot of work into it, and he's going to present this budget proposal to everyone here in a second for the public hearing.
Yeah, one person signed up. Neil Brocker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
All right, so how we got here, this started back at our retreat around Christmas time, so we began talking about big items, capital items. That's kind of when the budget really got started, the budget process. We had one workshop, that was when we went through all the capital items. Jerry Hatton led that meeting. That was a long one, going through all that list of projects, and we narrowed it down to a 5-year capital improvement plan. And then the next budget workshop was when we sit down with that financial planning tool and really got into the weeds. We looked at each department, and that's when we got direction from council to build the budget at 45.5-cent tax rate, which was a 4-cent reduction. So just looking at the general fund snapshot, and I'm going to keep this short since we had all that time that we put into this. So the value of a penny is $271,009. The tax rate that's proposed tonight is 45.5 cents, and that 4-cent reduction equals about 1.1 million less revenue than the current tax rate. And the total general fund budget is $20,350,000. That's a 10% 10% increase from the prior year. So looking at the general fund revenue, most of the revenues stayed the same as the prior year except for ad valorem. Of course, in a reval year, you see we are receiving $3.1 million in additional ad valorem this year. But the budget itself from the prior year increased $2.8 million. So where did that go? And you can see it by the departments. Public safety makes up over 50% of that increase. And then you can see recreation and streets and other is administration, capital, those kind of items. And you can see they make up about $300,000 apiece. So that pie chart right there equals that $2.8 million. And the general fund percent of budget by department tells that story. This is looking at the whole general fund, not just the increase from the prior year. You can see police, as is usual, most cities takes up the largest amount. You can see police, fire, and streets make up 75% of the total budget. And of course, you have a breakdown in your packet that has each line item in more detail about this. So new positions that are in this proposed budget: 1 new patrol officer, 1 firefighter. We have 2 in recreation. Down the road, as we get into this building, we did get a certificate of occupancy for this building the other day. That could increase. I still feel like we may need to. We'll get into the building and see how it goes, and it's going to be a work in progress, I'm sure. But a recreation specialist is in the budget, along with a janitor. That is a big building to keep clean. So that's for sure a full-time job. Then the administration and water and sewer. These 2 positions are split 50-50 amongst those 2 funds. See that customer service specialist, that point person as you come into this building, and then a human resource specialist that's needed as we continue to grow. Our HR department never has, so it's time to catch up there. And then the street maintenance tech, you see 1 there. You've been seeing 2 all this time, and in what you have in your packet, only 1 is proposed, because Bill and I had further discussions about those needs, and we felt that right now it was best to move forward with 1 position and go from there. There's some discussion tonight about a hybrid, but that's for later. But what's proposed here is 1 new streets position. And the capital improvement projects that are budgeted in this budget. And remember, we have a 5-year plan, so there's lots of other projects that are in this plan that are projects people want to see, but some of the funding doesn't come till later years. So we've got, excuse me, I'm going to get a slide here. The police duty firearms replacement, and then their vehicle replacements. We do vehicles on a lease now, but that police vehicle equipment is to outfit them, put all the cages and radios, all the stuff they need inside. Then the mini trash truck and claw truck, that one we're planning to use debt service for. The rest of these would be pay as you go. That's the only one that's debt service. And then the information technology replacements, there's like 4 different things there that need to take place: server upgrades, equipment upgrades, hardware, software, all kinds of stuff. So wiring that needs to happen in the server room. We've got the new camera system, the council dais construction with the AV equipment, and that's for this area back here. And these would be, of course, we bring proposals to you when we move forward through these projects. These are just placeholders with estimated dollar amounts with them. The Chronicle Street parking lot, Stowe Park and Davis Park playground solid surfacing, and the Davis Park picnic shelter. So this is what it means to us in that financial forecast. And the only thing different here is what you saw the other night is that growth rate. And the reason that we've got that 1% growth rate is based on what our financial advisors had recommended when we proposed to them a higher growth rate. They said that they recommend keeping it at 1 because each 1% is valued at $27 million in tax base. So that's equivalent of maybe getting about 80 homes that are valued at around $350,000 every year. And we have not been permitting that many homes annually. So that's why, and also considering we did include the major developments that we already know, they're all already included in the model. So really the 1% was, that was the most they definitely recommended going. So this is still though with the 45.5% tax rate, the capital improvement plan as presented, and that you see that we're good through 2028 on our expected fund balance, keeping it above 50%. And then it starts to dip a little bit. That's where we are. Let me see if I had one more. Then yes, then on to water and sewer. This is a snapshot. The overall budget is $9.3 million. There's a 1% decrease. We're not spending as much in capital this year, and we are also bringing in $1.2 million from our reserves to balance the budget from our net position. And so that's it on water and sewer. I don't have anything for stormwater. Stormwater remains flat, same as the prior year. And so now I'll entertain any questions if you have them.
Well, obviously that right there, doesn't seem sustainable. 1.2 million from reserves are included to balance budget. I assume that's what's prompting our the rate study that we're going to undertake, and hopefully, get the water and sewer fund in a position where it's going to be sustainable over the long term.
Do we know when the rate study will be completed?
We don't have a timeline listed. We just know that we were going to meet with them soon to go over a game plan, but I would think maybe 4 months.
Do we know what's left in the reserves after we make this withdrawal?
Yeah, the net position. Do you remember what it was, Jared?
Okay, I know that was kind of should have prepared you for that. But one other thought that just occurred to me is when we do the rate study, would it be possible to also look at the stormwater fees that we're charging and make sure those are keeping pace? Because I wouldn't want us to get in the same situation with that fund that we are with this fund. I mean, that one should be simpler because it's a smaller fund, smaller fee, but I just wouldn't want that to kind of erode over time like we've seen with this.
Will the rates that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Does everyone agree on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiffany's gone. The impervious area. I know it's based on impervious area, so I'm not sure how we're doing that now. $5. But who's measuring the impervious area rates? There's residential flat rate.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it 24% or something like that? Impervious, or maybe I'm.
That's a
watershed. Okay.
So this is equivalent residential unit. If it's 2,000 square feet, divide that into the impervious area they have, and multiply that by the residential.
For the sewer component of the water and sewer fund of this part of the enterprise, is this going? Whenever we do the rate study, is that going to include the potential, or the future hookup to Charlotte Water? I mean, when we're looking at it, basically operating at a $1.2 million deficit in the future, once we have the tap in and everything's good to go, will some of that be offset by the plant itself coming offline? Or you get what I'm saying? Are we going to have to do a rate hike, and then once we have the completion of the connection to Charlotte Water, will it then level back out, or is it going to kind of stay up there?
We'll ask the consultant to evaluate.
Okay, I'm just curious how that will factor into with the
still have
decommissioning.
A lot of costs associated with lift stations,
Which we'll keep online during.
and we'll of course have the new bill to Charlotte for that treatment. But I don't know if it can go down. We'll have that having the study.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just be curious, I mean, if the rest of council is okay with it too, looking at a report of where our major costs are associated with the water and sewer. I'm assuming it's going to probably be the water plant and then probably our sewage facility down there. So I'm just curious of what the impact of decommissioning that will be when, again, we do the tap into Charlotte water.
And in the budget, you can see the wastewater plant cost individually. So
I can pull it up.
Did we determine how much is left in the?
Yes, there's approximately 2.3 million left in reserves. I do want to mention that approximately $850,000 will be replenished to that from the general fund for the paving project that was approved last year. We have also submitted this budget to the LGC as part of the FEMA needed assistance list. They did see this. While it was not advisable, they understood why based on a 3-year trend. So while you've actually acknowledged the same thing they did, that it is unsustainable, but we are looking to correct that with that rate study this time.
So it's 2.3 plus another 850.
Just more than 3 million.
Okay.
So under the current model, a little bit over 2 years.
If you continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you, I'm noticing here, and I've noticed this for a while, that we split the cost of at least 10 senior management positions between the general fund and the enterprise fund. Now, while I know it's permissible, you also have to justify the level of each percentage, as I understand. But what kind of hit does that put to the enterprise fund? I mean, when you factor in 50% of salaries, 50% of retirement, 50% of health care, and those numbers rapidly go up and may impact this number somewhat. The money coming into the enterprise fund, I don't feel it should be used to offset salaries, but to go towards the projects for which they're intended. So have we looked at how much salary, including benefits, that we are withdrawing from the enterprise fund?
I can't tell you right now that dollar amount. I know that, salaries are allocated and are allowed to be allocated because we spend a lot of our time with water and sewer as much as we do, sometimes more so than other things that are going on. So it's part of that, of doing business, that enterprise fund. So those salaries, I think, are justified to come out of there. Now, we did go through, we've looked at the allocation and tried to make sure that we were doing it where it needed to be with the amount of time that each person was spending on it. Like we actually we've removed more from the enterprise fund over the last 2 years than we've added. For instance, the IT position was solely in water and sewer. I think it just happened that way because that prior person, their salary always came out of water and sewer, and they moved departments. But we removed that and moved that back under administration. We've separated that with a 50-50 split on water and sewer and general fund. We've also allocated stormwater to some people as well. Things weren't being allocated, like inspectors. Some of their salary was all going to water and sewer. So we've moved some of that to stormwater. So we have tried to look at each position and allocate those correctly, because there does need to be a reason for it.
So the IT position, because I was going to ask you about that, I did not see it in administrative, but I did see it debited in the water side for the full amount of $150,000.
No, that salary is not in there 100%. Is it on where are you looking from?
I'm trying to find that. I was looking at it this afternoon, and that caught my eye. I marked it, but I can't find the mark. But I was just, I mean, if you say that it's coming out in administrative now, then that's fine.
It's half and half.
Half and half.
Are you looking at the authorized staffing? Is that what that is?
Well, I could could tell you if I could find my mark, and I cannot, so I don't want to belabor the point or hold you up.
Sure, that's probably what it is, and maybe that's something that I just, these just didn't correct the
Okay.
percentage here, but in the budget, in the line items, I can show you later, it is 100% done at 50/50.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't find that.
It's got the chief technology officer in water and sewer, but it doesn't have the parentheses like the 60% or 50% currently.
Right. But in the budget it is. This is not. These are being fixed. And like Jamie's position, Jamie was a lot in water and sewer, and really there really is hardly any that she's dealing there. So we moved that to general fund.
There were a couple things, and I apologize if these were answered at the workshop maybe, where a couple things just jumped up in terms of expenses. I know for the streets, the capital line item jumped from 9,500 to 132,500, and I think there was one other something about supplies in water and sewer went from 190 to 267,000. I just was wondering what was the basis for those hikes.
You can look at the one on streets, and some of those, like I know chemicals or whatever, we used current numbers, and we used our previous audit, which if you remember.
Oh yes, I remember that.
In the past, we didn't go over maybe by department or fund, but we were going over in line items and not being able to, we didn't have financial statements to know that. But this year we had them, and so some of the things were corrected.
So on the water and sewer supplies, we've been blowing that line kind of out of the water for the past couple of years, and I think I submitted it to Kevin that we needed to up that line because we just weren't falling in line with that budget, and that's things we have to buy. That's new piping, that's meters. A lot of this money gets back in our pocket because we charge developers fees and whatnot. But that's the reason that one increased a lot, because we just wanted to match what we're actually spending in repairs per year. And on the streets one, so that's the new line item that Kevin had added in last year's budget, just for those 9 CIP purchases under $50,000. Last year we just didn't have a lot of needs. We had a couple more needs pop up this year that we wanted to purchase, which is why that line item's high.
And I know, to echo I was looking at the positions too, and I saw the marketing manager position to be paid for by the Tourist Development Authority. Whatever happened with that?
That's on hold right now. It's possible that the county may be helping us out to some extent with a position.
Well, I think they pretty much have at this point. I know did I miss the last one? The last meeting I was at, Michael Applegate came and introduced the person he had hired for that. So I think that is moving in the right direction. And as far as I can tell, the board is pretty happy so far with how that arrangement's working out.
So maybe that's something we don't need to list going forward.
Well,
yeah, I mean, we definitely don't need it in our budget for the city.
It was going to be funded by the tourism board.
Yeah. I don't recall how we've come down on the tourism budgets side of things, because I know that board usually adopts its own budget separately. Because we were using part of it this year, because instead of hiring somebody, we basically ended up using outside services for several months. And then we have this now active relationship with the county. I don't recall how the conversation ended on how we're going to end up using the funds in that.
So is it the county has somebody that is?
Yeah, so basically they came to us and were like, well, we're also looking for someone to kind of help coordinate, tourism and marketing and stuff for the area. So it was just kind of it was good timing on everybody's part. And they offered up to kind of work with us. I mean, it's an employee of the county, and they report up through them. But
well, Michael, Applegate is, I think, what he's envisioning, what he explained to us is someone on the county level working with each city
Yeah.
or township representing them and having kind of a unified tourism authority on the county level, which also coordinates with the municipalities.
Yeah, because the idea is that, like, you know, you don't want the county and then the city TDA.
Duplicating,
Yeah, or
think
spending money and yeah,
Mhm.
like it gets everybody on the same page, which I think is good too.
Just wait for this
Because
item.
part of what the tourism board wanted to accomplish was that, and making sure that we're, you know, spending the limited resources that we have in a way that's most efficient. So it does a lot to further that, and the benefit is it doesn't actually cost us anything. So that's a nice little perk too. So the approach we've taken is we're kind of see, since there's no immediate cost to the TDA for this position, just to kind of see how it works out and go from there. But I mean, the county's been a great partner at this point. So
That's great.
yeah.
That's going to be discussed at your meeting this week. Daniel has kind of an update, so I wouldn't do anything yet.
Okay. So there we go.
I had some questions on just operational growth. And I just wanted to ask you, I mean, I've seen, you know, particularly on the water and sewer side, you know, numbers more in line with what I might expect, but police, 34.24%, fire, 45.21%, Main Street increased 28.30%, planning and zoning, 56.05%. Park and Rec has gone up 36.02%, which I can understand because they're essentially doubling their size. But, you know, these are some large operational growth numbers. What is driving?
It's different for each one of these. We try to go through some of the larger ones, and we can bring up those departments. We want to do that. You know, salaries is the number one cause for the growth. New people that we've been adding on through the years, and some capital outlay in some of the departments. In the past, we did not budget capital outlay by department. We budgeted just one chunk change. Right now, we have we do have capital that's budgeted for that 5-year plan. Those big ticket items we've been talking about, those items between the 5 and the 50,000. We're putting those by department. It's easier to keep track of. So that's a little bit of it is capital, but the biggest thing would be salaries. Is there one, and you know, it's just a makeup of a lot of things. I'm looking at like gas and lubricants, you know, going up $22,000. Uniforms have increased from 25 to 60,000. So I mean, the department heads are all here. And we went through all of these line items, and I asked questions to every one of them on the increases, and it was justifiable, or it was the numbers we had been spending annually. Anyway, is there any that maybe you want to dive into more?
No, not in particular. Just the numbers. The percentages seemed high, but like. Are you saying personnel costs and operations? I mean, to hear they're separate line items. Are you saying those are a singular item?
Say that again, please.
What I'm looking at breaks out personnel costs and operations.
Yeah, you're looking at, I think it's page 13 in the budget message.
That's the summary.
Yeah, like for example, police operations last year was 734. This year is 989 for a 35% increase.
Isn't some of this because we now have audited financial statements to actually work off of? I mean, for some of these discrepancies in the past, didn't we go over that at the budget workshop? Because now, since we have true audited, like they are what they are, carrying forward.
Well, that's part of what's driving this too.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that's, I think, why there is such a huge shift, because in years past, again, no offense to any of the like staff members, we just didn't have audited financial statements that actually showed us what the true numbers were, or what they should have been.
And I do want to add to Alex's point, over the last few years, we have gotten findings for over budget. So this is an attempt to correct that and remove that
Well, I'd be interested in revisiting the discussion on the fire station if we're ready to have that talk.
Can you go to the Capitol and was it on there? Was it on there?
No, because
not yet.
the public safety station was planned to start funding it next year. I believe it was next year, and that would be a debt service payment. We would assume a debt service payment starting next year.
Next fiscal year.
Next fiscal year, I'm sorry.
Got you.
Yeah, the next fiscal year.
And so in that case, we really are okay to wait till another time to discuss that, right?
Well,
What's impacting
Because it's not affecting our budget this year, though, is it?
Well, I mean, I think it flows through to the tax rate that we'll ultimately set. Because, I mean, if you have an $8 million capital project that's going to hit next year, the amount of money you need to pay for that's different than if you're not going to do that or do it differently.
Yeah, and also, I've floated this to several people, including Miles, that I think that if the Abbey's going to charge us the rate that they seem to be headed toward, we need to look at possibly purchasing a piece of property instead, because we're doing this a whole lot for their benefit. So there are lots of moving pieces to this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to drop a multi-million-dollar asset on a piece of land that we don't own.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, just to add to what you're saying, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I struggle with the $8 million number. The previous number was substantially less. When we were discussing this, I mean, I think we got the cart before the horse. We've identified or said we need an $8 million facility, but I don't know that the data drives that. You know, a number of calls, what type of calls, where they are. I mean, I know that we are reaching the limits of our ISO rating, I think at 4.9 miles, and the limit is 5. So, I mean, I understand it from that perspective, but I think there's some numbers that we need to crunch because I'm fine with public safety, what we have to do for public safety. I don't know that we need an $8 million fire station up there, and it did have a disproportionate effect on the budget, the CIP aspect of the budget, but also the tax rate that we had to set because, you know, this is a fairly substantial item. So,
yeah. So, I mean, the approach that I think makes sense is to figure out like how much money we're comfortable spending on something like this, pencil that in to the capital budget, and then I know Miles has some forks in the fire to kind of, I guess, build, for lack of a better word, the business case for this, and then once we've got, I guess, a better idea of the size and scope of what this project needs to be, then we can kind of adjust it from there. So that way, you know, rather than starting at like the high end of like $8 million is, you know, what I would kind of consider a worst case scenario, we bring that number down to a level that's, I think, closer to what's likely to hit the mark. And then if we need to adjust it from there, you know, if we end up not needing the full amount, or we need to get a little bit more to pay for the project, I think a small adjustment at that point, once we've got a better idea of what it is we actually need, makes sense and is something that I think is fairer to the residents too, because like I don't want to overtax somebody for several years while we figure out what this needs to be. You know, I think it's, I mean, from my perspective, I think it makes more sense to say, okay, well, we set it based on this estimate, you know, and then if we need to come back and say, yeah, well, we're going to need an extra penny maybe, or maybe we don't need an extra penny, maybe we can give you a penny back, who knows. You know, I think it makes sense in that regard, in that it provides more stability to the bills that our residents will actually be paying. Yeah, I that's just my preferred approach. Others may have different opinions.
I know my wife agrees with you because we've had discussions like, well, why should I be taxed now and have it? I'd rather have the money now than have it be like given back to me later after I paid all this money. So let me ask this though: where does this $8 million come from? Let's start with that. Where was this figure derived that's currently in our projections?
7.9, I think.
Yes, 7.9. Yes.
Speak to that as an industry standard, I believe.
Mayor, Council, thank you. That that number came from the average square foot of $750 a square foot on a fire station at 10,000 square feet. Like I explained to you during the workshop, I've never built a fire station before. Belmont has it since 1974. But the fire station consulting firm that I've spoken with advised that price is going up 20% a year because it's just the rising cost of building materials.
Just to put it in proportion, so we're saying this is based off of a 10,000 square foot fire station. What is the current square footage of the fire station off of Keener Boulevard? It's roughly 6,000, so a little more than half of that. Out of curiosity, and again, this is just out of ignorance question, I understand coverage and the need for it, but it seems like, again, and I'm not a professional at this, but that might be an overkill for that.
Well, I
that
think
area?
we need to. Isn't another capital project to expand the current fire station because it's too small
to add the second roof on it,
yeah,
or the second level? Do we need? I guess where I'm trying to get to, because it's a good point too, is do we need two fire stations that are pretty much kind of similar in size to accommodate our end goal vision and being able to accommodate adequate service to everybody? I guess, again, we've talked about this, and this isn't supposed to be like an emotional thing, like I don't trust you. It's just trying to understand the data, because this is such a large expense for us.
It's like a roof. Everybody loves living under a roof.
It is, yeah. Right. Unless a hailstorm comes by, then insurance kicks them in.
Well, you just get random people knocking on your door asking if you need roof
fire
repairs.
station, have a headquarters station. Outside of that, they'll have filler stations in order to meet those ISO ratings, get those response time even across the board throughout their city. The options here truly are endless. You can move your headquarters station up north, revitalize the south. There's all sorts of things we could do. I would recommend a consulting firm or a company who specializes in this all the time.
When do we, I know we had talked about this, I think all of us had talked about this. When do we think that consulting firm would be able to collect the data and be able to present it to us?
We've got the proposal here, and it's 90 days, I think, to do the complete study, and then they come back to present that to council. And so, yeah, we're prepared to move forward with the actual study right now. We've asked the questions, they've responded as far as the timeline and the cost and everything. So 90 days from now, we should have a good answer on the actual siting of the station and the size of the station. They're going to use an architect to tell us exactly how much this station would cost per square foot to construct it, plus all the soft cost items that'll go along with it, which means that you build the building for this amount, but then you have to staff it and then
Thank you.
buy
That was going to be my second question.
and buy all the furniture, fixtures, and equipment that go along with it. So even if a station costs $5 million or $8 million to construct it, you still have multiple other things we have to do to actually get that thing operational. So this firm is prepared to pull all of that together for us and have a really good study. And also I think they're going to look into the call volumes in that area and the call data as far as whether it's medical or whether it's a false alarm or a vehicle accident or a fire, for example. So they're going to pull all that data as well and kind of cite it where they think it needs to be, and then we present that information to you all.
Yeah. They will actually come in and evaluate everything we have, and they'll look at us building that station up north. And they could say you don't need a station. Could very well.
Are these consultants, I think I heard, are they made up of ex-fire chiefs?
I believe so, yes, sir. But then they use on the side of it that they're not proficient in, for example, like the architectural, like the estimates for how much it costs to construct an item, they'll use an architectural firm to come in to help out with that cost that they're not aware of.
Yeah.
Are there any? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chief.
Gaston County has used this firm along with Gastonia City as well. They both are currently using this firm. So it kind of behoove us with everything going on out in the county to find out.
Do we have an update from the location in the county? I think we.
You're talking about the community fire station?
Community fire station, yeah.
I've been appointed to the Gaston County Fire Commission last week. I'll let you know.
Congratulations.
I'm not so sure.
That's a good thing.
This is a hot topic, very hot topic.
Very hot topic. So I guess, do you think that's a short-term conversation, or is that a hard to answer? Okay, I won't put you on that one. I was just curious. Kevin, sorry, one more. And I know we talked about this at the budget, but I can't remember. I believe we have the staffing in there for the fire station in this projection. Do we also have the equipment associated? We didn't do any type of plugs or anything with the future equipment?
No.
Okay.
I have engines now.
Okay.
Well, I still reiterate, I think it's important for us to get that data to find out what we need. I mean, so essentially we're going to hire the consultants and we are going to provide them with our in-house data regarding calls, what types of calls, response times, et cetera.
Yes, sir. I've already spoken with them. They have made sure that our software would interact with their software in order to gather that. They will also give us maps, layering, as far as calls for services, call for service, danger zones, and that sort of thing. Land use permits.
Let me ask a couple related questions. If we proceed as the budget is currently proposed, and this study comes back and says, "Oh, you don't need it at all," or it's going to be significantly less, what would the consequences be in that scenario? And if we decide to, on the flip side, if we decide to say, let's go down, let's put it at 3-4 million, not the 7.9 million, and the study comes back and says, oh yeah, you need it, and oh, by the way, it's going to be $10 million, what are the consequences of that? Would there be any consequences beyond, as Mark said, well, we might have to come back for an extra penny or something like that? So what are we dealing with what's the risk of being wrong in both scenarios?
In both scenarios, so you can set your tax rate, one time per year. So if you set your tax rate right now to accommodate that $8 million station, and it comes in at a lesser value, then of course next fiscal year you can adjust your tax rate as we move through the budget process. Vice versa, if it's more than the $8 million amount, then it would be a potential tax increase, next fiscal year at that time. So it's looking at that tax rate where it may fall, determining the actual station cost.
Well, I think if we go back and look, there was a study done, I think in 2002 or 2005 by the League of Municipalities, which identified that we wouldn't be a 3-station town. Keener, somewhere on the peninsula, and in North Belmont. So, I mean, the need was identified at that time. So I know the numbers have changed a little bit, but if somebody can lay their hands on that report, I would be curious to see what that said at that time. I mean, I share Mark's concern about we're going to set a tax rate on an unknown, and we can only do it once a year.
And we could be wrong in either direction.
Here's a scenario for you. If you didn't do the fire station, but you wanted to reserve $2 million, because if you don't build a fire station, you still have to remodel a building because it's not, we keep the house by the need now. And
Yeah.
where do you put the ladder truck go by?
The ladder 43 will go south. The new tower will go north.
Okay. So no fire station, use $2 million, every bit of it, to remodel the other station. So this is leaving it at 45.5, and you can see really this is more ideal than that. And you see you're keeping your fund balance good to 2032. And I can tell you, when we went to the LGC meeting, they're big on this fund balance. And it's not 8% anymore, like the old days. And when you compare your peers, and most of our peers are around 60. So this is
By that projection, by that date of 2032,
no, like
or are you saying like right now, currently in their 60s?
Some people more than that. That's where they're going to kind of want us. But we have our around 50. But this growth rate again, I mean, gosh, I think this is important. I think we went overboard with a higher growth rate because it's just not sustainable. Unless we're building that homes, unless we improve a lot, you have to improve a lot of homes. And if you want to get that 4% growth rate or higher. This gives you a scenario so you can see with 2 million, and you can kind of estimate from there either way.
I thought there was a separate project for the main station renovation. I thought we looked at that last time.
We did, but we didn't, it was listed.
Well, I want to make sure that we get what we need in whichever direction that we go. So I think hopefully the data will tell us that. You know, not to harp on data too much, but we did a water rate study years ago, and it told us exactly what we needed to charge going through so many years. You know, and until recently we were told how robust our water and sewer fund was. And when we get these audited financial statements, we find out that they are not. So that's why I hate to harp on data, but if I'm going to commit that level of money, I need to have something, if I'm questioned by the public, have some supporting documents or data to say we have the need.
And don't we have some, I thought there was some money at least earmarked towards this station. I know we talked about, we had the discussion about that at the retreat. I think not this past year, but the year before that. And then, you know, again, another unknown. We've obviously made this one of our top requests to our legislators to see whether we can get any money from the state. But, you know, again, we don't know if and when we're going to find out how much we might get towards that from the state.
$1 million from ARPA.
Right.
No, not ARPA.
Right.
Appropriated.
It was the
Yeah.
capital,
Yeah.
the state budget.
One caution would be if we are asking for that and we are looking at maybe not doing this or not doing it to that level, then that calls into question, why did we ask for that? So that concerns me as well. And I think we need to remember too, we did a tax decrease last year. And if we're looking at all these projects, even though we're not absolutely sure that the high dollar one's going to be there, I don't want to have to set a tax rate this year and then next year add to it. In other words, I'd rather do what we're doing because it just makes better sense to me as a resident. Okay, you did it, and we still, of course, are going to have to pitch that tax decrease because people are not remembering it and not realizing that it was there because all they want to know now with all the county is that. So we didn't do a very good job, not any of us individually, but because people don't remember from year to year. So I'm not in favor of decreasing the tax rate if that's where we're going with this based on we've already asked for funds to help defray expenses on this particular project.
I don't disagree with that logic, and I also don't oppose putting the fire station, North Station, on hold, but committing some money to remodel your station because we know the data on that. We know what your needs are. They're identified. But next year, I mean, we could, if once the data is in on the North Station, we can revisit the tax rate. And if it's appropriate to do another reduction, we could. I agree with what you're saying. I don't want to yo-yo the tax rate up and down on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of what I was trying to get at is like charging a tax rate based on an $8 million project that may or may not happen. I mean, that's going to have an outsized impact on the tax rate regardless of what you do. So that's why I was sort of advocating for more of like a middle ground on that, where you set a tax rate that accounts for some of that cost, with the understanding that there are a lot of unknowns out there at the moment based on like what we may or may not get from the state, what we may or may not actually need, and other things. So that is sort of my preference on that would be to, scale down the budget for this, give the difference back to the taxpayer, and then see what happens in the next 12 months and go from there. Because, I mean, by this time next year, we'll know whether or not we got a grant, whether or not we need the station, how big it needs to be. I mean, those are the three main unknowns at this point.
I guess I'm the one with the longest history here, but this very much concerns me just from the standpoint, look at it something more simplistic. The greenway that we agreed that I'm cutting out because of the cost and stuff, we've talked about this for 15 years, and the cost had escalated so much, it still does not make good financial sense to me to try to back off now and go forward later. I think we just, if we've decided this based on all the projects and that kind of thing, I'm comfortable with this tax rate. So it very much concerns me that we're talking about changing it.
And obviously, if we were to change it, we'd need to vote on the new proposed budget at a later date.
Where were you thinking of settling on the tax rate?
I mean, I had done some real rough back of the envelope math on this, and I mean, I'm sure Jared would probably want to weigh in, but it looked like if you took the budget for this down to about $3.5 million or so, you could give back another 2 cents on the tax rate.
Now, I was just doing a little rough math over here. So just looking at the square footage, let's say that we built the equivalent at, I think it's what, 790 square foot or something like that. I was just doing a back end calculation from the 8 million to the square footage. That would be roughly a $4.7 million project if we built what we have today in Keener, which I believe is 1 story, 3 bays, 3 bays, yes. So considering it's 10,000 square feet is the request, and to Jim's point, the extension to the Keener one, again, I think probably 4.7 is probably where we would get for that. If that was the same type of fire station. But again, I'm not saying I know what's needed up there, but I'm just saying I was doing the same thing, just kind of playing around with the math.
And that's the scenario with 2. Right there, that's over there. Just did a $2 million. That's taking out the fire department completely, that scenario, and replacing it with $2
Fire
million.
station.
I'm sorry. Fire station.
All right.
We're not eliminating the fire department.
Right, this is 8 million.
Fire station. That's
Okay.
taking that whole $8 million out and replacing it with a $2 million number that would be to remodel or do whatever. Now you're saying something more. So right there would be the scenario. And so the key difference, remember, is the growth rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're approving more than 100 homes a year, then okay, then we're getting that growth rate of 1%. So if we want 2%, we need to be approving closer to 200 homes a year to keep that growth rate. And those are $350,000 average. Does that make sense on the growth rate?
Yeah, do you know what our average on our growth rate has been, say, over the past 2 to 5 years? I mean, have we been
checked on permits that approved like 25 or so last year.
Right, so it varies, it ebbs and flows with the market.
But I think it was just percentage, but wasn't it between 1 and 3? Sometimes we had something high.
Sure, so we would need to go back and look at the reports. I think we provided them previously, but I believe you're right. It was between 1 and 3. I think the biggest difference, and Kevin had mentioned it earlier, was that we worked together on this model to input all known development that's already been approved. And so what we're looking at is the growth rate beyond those numbers being approved.
But let me, hold on, so that's different than what Tiffany's talking about. So the growth rate, I'm talking about the growth of the penny. So all I want to know is the number of homes that have been approved. So the number of homes, like last year was around 22, 23 homes, I think roughly. It was under 30.
In terms of new single-family home residential permits, I would need to double check that. That's because permits for approved development, I want to make sure we're not double counting. Either way, we're not seeing those large spikes, because what's happening is you guys are approving plans over time, and then those plans have to go through the construction code review and permitting. So it's taking a while for those homes to actually get built out once you're approving plans. And sometimes that timeline is causing things to feel really residential heavy, but over time it's not playing out that way.
So that's what I want you to understand. It's the value of the penny is what that 1%, that growth rate.
Yeah.
So if we grow 3% wise on when they're talking, that's not the same as a value of a penny. So a value of a penny says $270-some thousand, and it takes 20. Let's see, what was that? 27 million. Yeah. Each percent. So that's about 70 to 80 homes a year at $350,000 a piece will give you the 1%. We have not been approving that many homes annually. Okay. And I'm sure there were some boom years in the 2012s and some of those 13 when you were doing more, but that's not been the case. financial advisors that work with cities in many states and do this all the time have in the email that you received in one of your reports that they highly recommend that you do not go over 1% growth rate. I said, you know better than we do, but this is what we recommend as financial advisors. So that's what's plugged in there. And that scenario, you can see that was more kind of what we were going for anyway when we left here after that last meeting, to keep us at that above 50% for several years.
Does this have the for the staff cost projections? I know the initial model of this had it 5.
It has the police and the fire that we put in there.
No, I mean overall. Like there was an overall like 5% increase in compensation every year.
It to the 3, or what did we reduce it to? Did we reduce it to 3%?
It was 3.
Mm-hmm.
Which made a pretty big difference.
So is that in here? Because it's got the same like trajectory as what it had when it had the 5 in here. So that's why I was just wondering if it had the 5 or the 3. I'm looking at the unassigned fund balance because when I got it to the 3, it actually the fund balance stabilized. But
yeah, pull it up. I have it up. Okay. So we're changing the fire station to 1.98. So roughly 2 million. And make sure that the growth rate on salaries under the cash flow tab says 3, and we had 5%. It does. Starts at 20%. So I knew that we put it at 3 and saved it that way.
Starts the 5% until 2028, and drops to 3% ongoing.
okay, is that in this?
Yes, it is. That was screen set today.
Okay.
That's based on what he's looking at. Yep. Because I emailed him that model right before this meeting to make sure he had it.
Okay.
So that's the 3% increase in salaries after about 3 years. What will you agree to?
All right, and we're playing with all these numbers. With what you're saying now, are you talking about taking the new fire station out of the picture totally then, or not?
That's it with that. It's
Okay.
no fire station,
Well,
but there's $2 million in there for
Renovation.
renovation.
but I don't think we can take that out. If we've asked for money from the state, that to me is a big no-no. We're not going to take that out. In order you want to lower the amount of it, that's fine, but I do not see taking it out of the picture.
Could you just use this as an example where you said 4.7 million on a
That's-
smaller station?
Yeah, I'm
So
okay
it's
looking
more
at that, but
than
this
Yeah.
is concerning me here, what we're
Well,
looking at.
let me, a couple of things, and this might be a very unfair question, but what do you think, Miles? Based on what you've, I mean, I'm struggling with this.
You're putting him in the fire literally and
Yeah.
figuratively.
Well,
here.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, luckily we've got the fire department.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when you're talking about like the number of homes that are permitted, even if we permit 100 homes, then you have to have a CO by December of last year to even consider that for next fiscal year, because that's how the county looks at projecting like the property values.
Right.
And so, moving forward, you would have to make sure that by that December, if you're moving in that next fiscal year, you have to have all those items, all that CO'd in. So that's really aggressive, considering I don't know how many are in the queue currently. If you're looking like years future, not 2024 but 2025, you can consider whatever's in the queue right now possibly could be CO'd by December of this year, which would help out for next fiscal year. So I'm just trying to think about the future and like the growth rate on top of that.
Right.
And then using that 1%. So I think the 1%, just like Kevin has been preaching here, is that we should keep that, because that's where the financial advisors are telling us it needs to be as well.
Yeah.
To the fire station's perspective, I don't have enough data to say whether it's a $5 million
Neither do we.
or an $8 million. Therefore, I talked to Chief about we need to get more information. Let's hire this Chiefs Association or Chiefs Consulting Group to help us out, because I just don't have a good feel what the amount is and which way to go with it. So,
because I understand Martha's point, but I also understand like having a $7.9 million figure there. If that's not what we, there's there's a risk both ways. But I mean, to Alex's point, I mean, I'd be interested. So if we say 4.7, if we say 4.7 and 44.5 on the tax rate, where would that leave us?
And to go back to the point of the fire station too, so if you consider it an $8 million station or a $5 million station, and you're thinking about the tax rate at 45.5 cents, the thing that we've been kind of talking through internally is that where the red numbers pick up, the red column there, unassigned fund balance is dropping down below your 50% standard or policy that's been set, and so that's kind of what we've been looking at. So no matter the adjustment of 8 to 5, I think we still hit the red at some point. We're just trying to push the red further out in the years. And
So I just plugged it at 4.7 million and plugged the tax rate at 44.5. We start dipping below that 50% threshold in 2029. But I guess on the flip side of that, right, if we drop it to 44.5 and it comes in higher, we're going to be dropping below that 50% threshold within 2 years. We're going to really need to make some big adjustments.
that's the thing we've been kind of struggling with right there, is that looking at the red. When do we get to the red? We get to the red in all of them, but how far out can we get before we get to the red? So that gives you, if you drop it at 45.5 cents, we've looked at other municipalities, where most of them are meeting tonight or this week to kind of set their tax rate. So we're saying, where do we compare with everybody else as well? Where does this number fall? Can we accomplish, your goals? Can we have operational, making sure everybody's operational, and also making sure that the employees are receiving a 2% across the board, and then that 3% merit. So we were all comfortable with the scenario that played out a couple of weeks ago, but it's your tax rate. You can tell us to adjust it, and we'll work with it however y'all see fit.
Okay.
Well, it's a lot of variables. We don't know if we'll get something from the state. I mean, I don't know if they've adopted their budget, but it's got to go to reconciliation after that. More than likely to hammer out these awards, so that could be several weeks out still. So we may or may not be receiving any funds. Now, community is also a possibility. Community comes, we're able to work a deal like we did with the South Point Station, and this might not be an issue at all. But again, I mean, we're talking about a lot of variables. I understand what Mark's saying is we're going to pin the taxpayer to a rate on something that we haven't identified the need for, not specifically. We've assigned a square footage cost prior to establishing the need of how much square footage we need. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Martha, but I mean, in some ways, I don't want to hold the taxpayer hostage pending a decision by our legislators either.
I don't consider holding taxpayers hostage. We have a number of projects that we want to fund, and this one is a priority one. So if we hold this tax rate and we don't end up having to spend that money, some of the other projects that we put on the back burner, would be a possibility. So I don't consider it holding hostage. I don't, as I said, I don't want to do one thing and then next year to do the other. If we are in flux like this, I'd rather establish something and stay with it, as long as it's not unreasonable. And I don't think this tax rate that we worked on and had our staff work on is an unreasonable tax rate. It seems fairly reasonable to me.
All right, so we're going to have to come to a tax rate and a number, the number on the fire department. I think has to resolve this.
Yeah.
I mean, the only need that I know that we seem to have any kind of numbers or data on is 2 million plus or minus, and I don't know what the percentage of plus or minus is to retrofit the Keener station to bring it up to where we can house male and female firefighters and have the decontamination, I believe, was another request that you said was needed. So I mean, I feel comfortable with that because I mean I've got something to work with there. But even if we assign 4.7 million, I don't know what we need there. I mean, previously the recommendation was for 1 bay, 1 engine, and the shift crews to man that. Now we could possibly go into 3 bays and office space. I don't know, 3 bays, how many crews that's going to take. So what I worry about is what, Miles, I think what you were touching on, these numbers can go up exponentially very quickly. Because if it comes back saying it identifies the need for an $8 million station at that cost per square foot, then all of a sudden, okay, we need these many firefighters, we need these many engines, we need this much gear. I mean, these numbers are going to, if that $8 million is the need, you can bank on another $2, $3, $4 million to outfit, equip that building probably somewhere in that general vicinity.
Well, then that's going to be additional load in your operating budget too, because you're going to have to pay those people every year, you have to equip them every year, all that good stuff that comes with owning and maintaining things.
I think, I'm just going to be, I think we could go back and forth on this. I think we just need to decide because, to Jim's point, it could go either way, right? We do it and then we're over budget, or we do it and then we're under budget. And I don't think we can really answer anything unless we get this business case from the consultants, from the fire department. I don't know if I feel comfortable going one way or the other, so, we leave somewhere in the middle. Yeah. I don't know where we go from here, but I think we could keep toying around with it. We just don't know.
Well, I'm gone back and forth. I think I'm with Martha. I think at the end of the day, I'd rather err on the side of all right, we said 7.9, and if it turns out to be less, then we can reduce the rate next year. Mm-hmm. I'm just more concerned on a number of levels if we guess wrong and we go too low, and then it's like, oh crap, we were off. Sorry guys, 3 cents more this year.
Well, the other variable here that very much concerns me is sitting right there, because we have no clue as to really what it's going to cost to operate that facility, how much use it's going to have, because this is, it's very impressive, and people, I think, are going to use this. So that's the other concern from my standpoint, is that if we have some money not to play with but to use, we may need to use it to help do something right across the street here.
Well, I just feel like we've been so aggressive with our capital program the last few years that, I think we as a city just kind of really need to take a breath. Mm. And because we got that. Now we're talking about adding another $8 million building up in North Belmont with a whole bunch of unknowns.
See, I'm more in your camp on that issue, because if we guess wrong, I'd rather just give the money, cut taxes more than find something else to spend it on.
Would you all be open then? The scenario to hold the tax rate, pull the fire department out North Station till we have the data, but fund the renovations for Keener?
I don't think that we can do that. The only reason why I say that is because, to Martha's point, we did specifically ask them for a new fire station, and I don't know what Donnie put the language in there for. But to Mark's point too, though, we can. That's a valid. We could lower it. That money can still go to the fire station, or maybe then you roll the dice and say maybe we get a little bit more, and the fire station comes in at, let's say, a couple $1 million above 4.7, and we offset that with what we get from the state. There's so many different options that could happen here. So, but I do think we asked Donnie, if I remember correctly, Jamie, he sent it over, the draft to us was explicitly a fire station. Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to address the fire station tonight at all. It's not.
Yeah. No, right. But it does. It does affect. It does affect.
Yeah.
Nobody signed up.
When is our work session?
Sir?
When is our next work session?
Next Monday.
The 19th, okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
So we do have one person signed up to speak in public comment, public hearing.
Well, let me ask you, just operationally for us, I mean, would we be able to defer a decision on the budget to our workshop on the 19th? That would give us some time to digest a little bit what's been said tonight.
I mean, what revelations do you think will take place in the next 7 days?
Maybe we can talk to Donnie
When,
and Brad and see what the temperature is up in Raleigh, because I have not done that. Because they might have an idea.
You're right, it's only 7 days, but it would give us an extra week to hear from our legislators. And I don't know if that's being overly optimistic considering at the pace that they seem to.
Well, the wheels of government churn slowly.
Yeah.
But they churn.
They do churn.
We could postpone the vote for tonight and have a budget ordinance prepared for next Monday. But really, to design the budget, we would like to know like where that tax rate would be. I don't think it's having it open ended right now. We have to prepare like multiple ordinances based on the tax rate, so I don't know which one to prepare.
We have one person signed up to speak, Neil Brock. How you doing, Neil?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Is that a Gardner Webb running Bulldogs?
I'm a Gardner Webb graduate.
Oh, very good. Yes.
Very proud of it. Still hold the record there. Before I get started on this budget, allow me a few moments back a little bit about the KBD. I served on that board for many, many years. It is a vital part of the city. I hope you'll keep that continue on. And I would like to thank Councilwoman Martha Step. Many times she came to our meetings, not as just an elected official, but not to influence it, but just as an elected official to put her input in. And I know that took a lot of time on your part. Thank you for your service. But I got to look at this budget here, and a little bit of a shock. You have an entity here that sometimes is reported as an entity, sometimes it's not been reported as an entity, and that's the Main Street program. Its budget is proposed to go up another $60,000 this year. Last year's reported 456, is asking for a 516. That's a little over $60,000 jump. When I went through it, I see the expenses there line by line on the expenses of what they incurred. What I don't see is a revenue stream. How do we know what it makes? Where did it make it from? How did it get paid? What was the alcohol sales? What was its contributions? What was its grants? It's not here. Never had it. But I can see Belmont Tourism reports. It reports its revenue. It also reports its expenditures. This component does not. That's not transparency. And I hope you'll take a look at that. Because I want to know. $500,000 is going into this. Maybe it needs another $500,000. I don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't need the money. I'm just saying, how do you justify that? I see expenditures, but I don't see. Maybe it's making gobs and gobs of money. Maybe it needs more money, maybe it needs less money, but we don't know that. I don't see a line-by-line revenue stream. All I see is pure expenses. What started out from the Merchants Association as in-kind services only, zero cost to taxpayers, now grown to $500,000. Want to save some money on your budget? Start here. Every department should justify what it's asking you for. Every part of the city, whether it be the fire, the police, the maintenance, whatever. You know, it needs its money, but show me what that need is and how did you derive that number. You can't just go plucking it out of thin air. That's all I'm asking you for. Any questions for me? I'll be glad to answer. By the way, I had to file a Freedom of Information Act. Got a response. Thank you, Jim, for that. And And I found there was some tax issues. Fell into file for 3 consecutive years, one of them. So we had an entity that didn't report for 5 consecutive years after it was birthed by the city, that also got in trouble with its taxes. But it's asking you for money. That's not transparency. Where's the money? I want to know. Let's find it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. All right. Next item on the agenda.
Whoa.
Hang on.
Oh, yeah, that's right, we're gonna vote on this.
Or table, whichever you want to do.
Forgot about that, okay.
Yeah, well.
All right.
You want to come out of public hearing
Come out of public hearing,
and then discuss, or you want to keep
yeah.
I guess we can come out of public hearing and discuss.
We've heard the public.
Hmm?
We've heard the public.
Yes, that's true.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're out of public hearing. Next is the, draft the budget ordinance for the Belmont fee schedule, City of Belmont's fee schedule.
So, did you have a tax rate in mind?
I
particularly, Mark?
mean, the range I was looking at was a penny or two,
In
depending.
addition to the 4 cents that we're offering off of it?
Yes, depending on what we wanted to do with the budget for the firehouse. So, that was where my head was at.
So Miles, I know you asked for a range of where we should be if we did so decide to push it to the workshop. Would it be prudent for everybody here just to acknowledge that where we're at is either 45 and a half or down the additional cent? I mean, is that fair to say for the range? If we did decide to push it to the next, I would personally like to talk to Donnie. I'll take responsibility for not reaching out before this meeting. It's been pretty hectic with us moving, but we were out of town. But I think it would be nice to at least check the temperature to see where they are and if there's been any sidebar conversations with that. I know he can't give us anything in writing right now, but they probably have directionally an idea of what horses they've traded so far. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
I mean, that's fine, and then maybe staff could prepare, because we've got this ordinance. Well, this is the code enforcement report, but we have an ordinance. And then maybe if you guys wanted to prepare an alternative ordinance, we could then just decide which one we want to do.
So keep the 45 and a half and then put one at 44 and a half?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, does everyone, I know directionally we're not voting, or maybe we're not voting on it tonight, but just directionally, again, I know last year I said it's very important. I feel like for me personally is that we're all kind of aligned, unanimous on this budget so we can all support it and back it. So I think pushing it out till next week is probably pretty prudent.
That's fine. I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens in a week.
Martha?
Well, I'm obviously more amenable to 45 and a half, but I'll consider the alternate.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, I think it does buy us a week to potentially hear and get some clarity on whether we're going to be awarded or not. It is a week. We statutorily have to have this accomplished by June 30th. All right, and
I would imagine we have to notice. There's some notice requirements too. Would there be? No.
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. The train pulls out now on me now and then. Yeah. I mean, we already have a regularly scheduled workshop, so it's not like we're adding.
You're going to say we had to have it by June 30th.
I did say that.
Yes.
I would also like to know how that impacts everything else. I mean, the variables that were floated was keep the station, take the station out, cut it in half, essentially, or devote the money to the known needs at Keener. So That would be my question, yeah. I'm fine with that option of either staying at 45 and a half or 44 and a half, but how do those scenarios play out within that?
And then just one more note to Martha's point that she brought up earlier. I mean, we did do, 2 cents last year, where a lot of other municipalities held constant,
Right.
in preparation for the potential. Now, granted, we were far off, right? I mean, with what the reavals came into, but I mean, it is.
We tried.
We did try, and we did ease the burden of what we're having to take in today, or this week or next week, when we set that new rate at the proposed 4. So again, in aggregate, you're looking at 6 cents with the proposed, or 7 cents with the potential proposed over the past 2 years. And again, if the budget, or excuse me, if the fire station comes in far less, we take the next step, another appropriate step next year, and ease in the burden for a 3rd consecutive year, which I'm sure most municipalities don't do. So just, again, 2 more cents there, or 2 more cents. Just my input.
Your 2 cents.
Yeah.
So then would the vote be to, the motion would be to defer?
I'll make the motion to defer it to June 19th to that
I'll
workshop.
second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Public hearing for the density on the peninsula, text amendment to reduce the density of developments on the peninsula and incentive increased lot sizes.
Motion to go into public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No one signed up to speak.
Yeah, nobody signed.
Good evening, City Council. This is text amendment 2022.06 related to density on the peninsula. As a reminder, we began exploring this idea after direction from City Council to look at reducing the density or incentivizing larger lot development on the peninsula, specifically to address 4 hopeful goals. 1, to reduce the impacts on our limited transportation network. 2, to recognize our current utility infrastructure capacity limitations. 3, to respond to the surrounding land uses and community character. And 4, to respect our natural resources. In doing this exercise, we wanted to look at multiple pieces of information to help inform our recommendation. And so we did look at consistency with our comprehensive land use plan, our current regulations, and our limitations on the peninsula, what other municipalities, both in the area and across the state, are doing, and ultimately evaluating some different options for our consideration. And so I just want to go over a snapshot of discussions and analysis that have been done today. We looked at historic growth patterns, both for our core as well as spreading out into our more suburban areas. We looked at the evolution of Belmont's land development code and comprehensive land use plans. We looked at an analysis of Belmont development over time, including both approved and proposed residential developments on the peninsula. We explored tools that we currently have available to regulate growth, as well as tools that might be opportunities for us. And then we also looked at where any changes might apply. And so just going over a brief history of development, more information was provided to you in your packet, but just some highlights I wanted to mention here tonight. In 1870, the railroad came to Belmont, and this is really what spurred a lot of our growth. In 1930, over 20 textile mills and mill villages began to develop here in our community. In 1966, Belmont was really forward-thinking and developed our Land Development and Community Facilities Plan. This plan had some key highlights, including low density defined as 2 dwelling units to the acre, and referenced amity acres having a larger than average lot sizes and the lots in that community as 2/3 of an acre. Also in 1966, we had our first zoning ordinance here in Belmont, which defined the R20 zone, which is the suburban and low density zoning designation, which allowed for suburban and low density development with lots under 1/4 of an acre if utilities were available, and under 1/2 an acre without utilities. Fast forward to 1995, The land development code was updated here in Belmont to reflect some new urbanist ideologies. And according to the Carolina Planning Journal, one of the reasons that we turned to new urbanism in our community is that most of the lots in the older parts of town that were originally part of mill villages were going to be considered non-conforming. And so we wanted to take a look at that and include that into our land development standards. So again, we mentioned we looked at tools that we already have available for use here in the city. Just wanted to highlight some of those. Those include our stormwater ordinance, watershed ordinance, utility capacity and connection policies, traffic mitigation ordinance and policies, the South Point Peninsula overlay zoning designation, as well as policies relating to annexation into city limits. Some tools that staff found might be available for us to delve into a little bit further would be to incentivize increased lot sizes, potentially by decreasing the required infrastructure, as well as updating the density envisioned in the comprehensive land use plan. And so with that, we began analyzing what are the lot sizes within some of our existing neighborhoods in the urban fabric of Belmont. We did look at primarily those on the peninsula as a point of context, since that's the area that we're looking to identify further, ranging from Belmead at 0.4 acres average lot size down to Glenmere at 0.86. So there is a range we see from falling just below half of an acre to just under 1 acre in size throughout the peninsula. In addition to that, we looked at the approved and under construction developments on the peninsula, and you can see them listed here on your screen. And as you can see, they range in some of the northernmost one, Smith Farm, where there's townhomes from 3.3 dwelling units to the acre, down to South Point Woods, which is actually a rural residential zoning designation at half a dwelling unit per acre, so 2 acre lots. But mostly they fall in the range of right around 2 dwelling units the acre, some at 1.8, some at 2.2, but a mix of that. Then also looking at our active applications on the peninsula currently, we see that we're right in this mid-2 range as well. So 2.22, 2.28, 1.74, we're kind of hitting that 2 dwelling units the acre on average spot. Looking at our current zoning regulations, just to be clear, a large portion of properties in Belmont are already constructed or currently have applications pending for development. And you'll see them labeled in the map on the right. Gaston County has control of land use regulations on the areas outside of our current municipal limits, or ETJ, which is extraterritorial jurisdiction areas. However, if any property seeks annexation, Belmont's comprehensive land use plan and our land development code would apply to those subject properties. We do have an area right now, our rural residential zoning designation, that does allow for development of larger lots that limits the lot area to a 2 acre minimum. What we're finding, though, in communications with our developers is that this is often too costly for the development community to pursue. The infrastructure is still required right now in our ordinance standards, so both the extension of sewer as well as water lines down there to serve proposed development. So one example you can see of this is South Point Woods. Again, it has 2 acre lots, but those lots are still narrower in nature and deep into the development. And so it's not necessarily what one would at first envision when we think of a 2 acre lot size, although it does meet the criteria and was developed that way. So when we're looking at where to apply new regulations for density on the peninsula, first we wanted to look at what were the applicable areas be within our current city limits. And it's our recommendation that these would apply in the suburban residential zoning designations, as well as within the South Point Peninsula overlay. And so on the map to the right, you'll see these areas highlighted in burgundy. As you can see, we do have some developments that are either active or approved. River Mist is 1.9 dwelling units to the acre, approved for 86 single-family residential homes. Henry Chapel is pending. There's an active development application currently proposed at 2.28 dwelling units to the acre, just south of that. And Worrells River, just north of Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens, at 2.26 dwelling units to the acre, and that approved development, that is an approved development as well. Which leaves 2 areas primarily within Belmont's zoning jurisdiction here in city limits, and that's the rear portion of the Belmont Middle School property as well as the Tucker Road property circled in yellow on your screen. So what about the other areas then? As I mentioned before, any area that proposes annexation into city limits we would then look to our comprehensive land use plan. So the latest one we have to date is our 2018 comp plan, and the peninsula, as shown on the right, is envisioned primarily as semi-rural neighborhood. This allows for both conventional lot development as well as cluster lot developments. It does include specified village centers, which are envisioned only to develop with new and improved roadways that would support additional traffic load. There is also a small area plan, the South Fork Small Area Plan, that identifies densities concentrated in developable areas, specifically to address things like environmentally sensitive locations, topography, wetlands, and everything else that we find on the peninsula. In this area, there is a proposed mix of residential uses and densities for more walkable neighborhoods and connected trails and open green space. But other than that, on all the more yellowish tan areas, that is proposed as semi-rural neighborhood within a comprehensive land use plan. And so, zooming in a little bit more, what are the applicable areas for a text amendment in this wider range zone? Just wanted to share again that the light yellow right now is that suburban residential area. The red is again that area that is the suburban residential or South Point Peninsula overlay zoning designation within current city limits. Teal is also city limits, but areas that already have been developed or approved as other zoning designations. And so what remains is the areas that are still in yellow that you can see on our screen that could potentially one day request annexation into city limits and be applicable to anything that we approve for text. But when we add on the already subdivided parcels, we can see here that a lot of those areas are also already developed out. It's not that the land couldn't be recombined, but you can see here there's smaller parcels that make up that larger land area. With one notable larger parcel that we're all familiar with, which is an active development application for Lakeview Farms, just north of Reflection Point, as you can see on your screen. Just as a reminder, any regulations under consideration tonight would not apply to any applications that are currently in progress, but would apply if any of these sites or if an active application is withdrawn or any new development applications that would be filed here within the city. So, in preparation of text for your consideration, we did want to make sure that we were reviewing and analyzing these things with some major points in mind. One is the protection of our natural resources and how it relates to our open space regulations, as well as the total site disturbance area for any proposed new development. One is the impacts or potential impacts on housing affordability and the options available for housing choice here in the city, as we know that any regulations we adopt for land development have a direct cost on development costs, which are then passed on to our future homeowners. Our infrastructure network, both in the number of trips generated by a new development per day, as well as the amount of utility usage and how much linear foot of utility line would be necessary in order to support that new development, as well as ongoing maintenance costs to the city once that project is turned over. So that includes any new roads or any new utility lines that would then be dedicated to the city after the project is completed. We also wanted to make sure that we understood its implications on walkability in our communities and in our neighborhoods. The impacts on property values, and we talked a little bit about that in the budget hearing tonight, both on the values for our current homeowners as well as our future homeowners, and how that might implicate or have changes on the future tax base here in Belmont. And ultimately, how all of this really impacts the community character we seek to create on the peninsula, and what's consistent with our historic growth patterns and the changes we'd like to see over time. So, keeping all of that in mind, the proposed text amendment before you tonight provides two options for development on the peninsula. One, which we traditionally see, is cluster lot development. What we are proposing is to keep the regulations the same, but maybe enhance them a little bit in order to provide for increased environmental protections. And so, As a reminder, cluster lot developments would allow for detached street or alley-loaded lots. We are proposing in the text a 30% minimum open space requirement. What we saw when we analyzed it is a lot of the cluster lot developments that have been approved to date range at about 10% required open space. Now, some developments choose to provide larger than this in open space. Del Webb, for instance, has about 28% open space as a part of their approved development. But we currently have open space generated based off of a matrix system. The lower the density, the lower the amount of required open space. So as we look to lower density, we wanted to make sure we were addressing its impacts on open space as well and protecting our natural areas and stream buffers. Cluster lot developments, these normally are able to locate their tree save area required within common open areas for HOAs to be able to maintain. We do ask that they have a 660-foot block length or 1/8 mile block length. This provides a more tight-knit roadway network and more walkability in the neighborhood. And a new requirement that we are proposing within this type of cluster development would be a 50-foot streetscape buffer along the frontage of any major roadway corridors. And this is because what we heard is that a lot of times when people are riding down South Point Road, they want to see the trees. They want to feel like it's a suburban or more semi-rural type of experience. And so we wanted to make sure that we were mindful of that, and then we provided for an opportunity to maybe have more dense type of development, but keeping in mind the desire for more treescape on our corridors. So that is proposed in the text amendment. We also wanted to be really clear that while conventional lots and conventional lot developments are currently and always have been allowed, to really be clearly written in our ordinance to be able to define what those are and maybe reduce the infrastructure required in order to incentivize more people to utilize this option for development. And so you'll see an added section in the proposed text that identifies conventional lots as a 1/2 acre or greater. These would be detached street lots only. Allow for a 20% reduction in the required open space. Again, this is because a lot of the times their open space is in somebody's backyard. It's on their private property is where they're tending to gather, right, or invite people over instead of going to a shared common open space. What we do know that we would need to address further when we do updates to our tree save ordinances is that this would result likely in tree save primarily being located on private property. And so that might mean that until this is adjusted, we might see more restrictions on private properties for new homeowners. Understanding that we'll need to change that, this is something that is on staff's radar. We are proposing that the block lengths within conventional lot developments be wider, 1/5 of a mile as opposed to 1/8 of a mile. And again, that we would incentivize infrastructure reductions where they make sense based on lot size. So this could include things like a reduction in the required curb and gutter, the amount of street lighting, sidewalk, and septic. So I've tried to provide a chart to break that down a little bit more clearly and looking at this more of a stair-step approach. So for lots that are less than a 1/2 acre or cluster lot development, none of the options that I mentioned before would be eligible. But for developments that opt to create lots of a 1/2 acre or greater, we start adding incentives. So the first one would be for a 1/2 acre or greater lot, they could potentially install sidewalks on one side of the street only. So they would still be required to have sidewalks, but on one side only in order to reduce that infrastructure and still make the community walkable, but feel a little bit more suburban. If the lots were increased in size to 3/4 of an acre or greater, they could not only do that, but also choose an option to provide a ditch cross-section for the street if they didn't want to utilize any on-street parking. This would save them the cost of the curb and gutter infrastructure and still allow for water to flow off the street and into proper channels. And then for lots that were created or communities that were created with lots of an acre or larger in size, we would allow for those incentives as well as the ability to develop utilizing septic instead of running sewer lines down to areas of the peninsula. And so, again, it's a stair-stepped approach that would incentivize a developer or lot owner based off of the end goal that we felt like council had directed us to look at, which was to try to figure out how we can have more diverse lot sizes on our peninsula. And so, in summary, what's before you tonight is an adjustment of several chapters of our land development code in support of the information presented before you. These include changes to Chapter 2, adding a definition for conventional development. Chapter 3, general regulations to increase the block length maximum to 1/5 of a mile for conventional developments, and add an option for septic if lots are an acre or greater. In Chapter 4, building forms, to keep the existing detached street lot building form and add a building subtype for conventional development lots. With the standards that we talked about before, one of the other things is that this would have a minimum lot width of 80 linear feet. So our current is 55 linear feet. These lots would be proposed to be wider by nature, in addition to being larger in overall square footage. With that comes also some regulations on minimum setbacks, both increasing the side setback and the front setback for conventional lots. In Chapter 5, we are proposing to reduce the maximum density within the suburban residential and South Point Peninsula overlay zone from 3 dwelling units to the acre to 2 dwelling units to the acre, which is based off of the gross site area. And again, to amend the open space regulations required to allow for a 20% reduction in conventional developments and a 30% minimum for cluster lot developments. In Chapter 8, the changes would reflect sidewalk being required on one side only in suburban residential and South Point Peninsula overlay zones, and curb and gutter being optional in 3/4 of an acre plus, and still required for on-street parking. Chapter 11, landscaping, would introduce the 50-foot minimum type A landscape buffer for cluster developments within the same zoning designations. And then finally in Chapter 12, lighting, we are proposing that street light intervals of 200 to 250 linear foot be allowable within suburban residential and South Point Peninsula overlay zones. Planning Board held this item on May 18th and unanimously recommended the approval, 7-0, and made the following findings: that the text amendment is reasonable and in the public interest as it supports infrastructure needs, and that it's consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan in the areas of land use, community character, and infrastructure. And with that, I stand by for any questions or comments that you may have for staff, and then invite you for public comment.
I have several comments. First of all, when you look at new urbanism in our 1995 land development code, my husband spent 10 years on the zoning board. He was chair at that time, and we were the first in the nation, not just in the state, to develop something that was this comprehensive. So Dimitri Bacchus will bear that out. So I had him evaluate this, because if anybody knows enough to comment on it, it's not us. And he was very complimentary of Tiffany as far as the appropriate adjustments that have been made, considering the time and what we're looking at now. So I wanted to make sure that I let you know that, because I don't have the expertise. None of us sitting here do, but he does. So I want to make sure and make that comment.
Thank you, Martha.
When you say he, is that Sam or Dimitri?
Dimitri's the one who told me that we were the first in the nation. My husband does not compliment himself, so I didn't pay good attention at the time myself either, but yes.
Well, I echo Martha's comments. If only, this had been done years ago, because, based on what your presentation, it seems like there's a couple properties and maybe a couple more depending on how applications turn out, and then any area that wants to annex in that's currently in the county, but it seems like even most of those lots are under development. So it's unfortunate that perhaps the scope of this wouldn't be as broad as perhaps we would like. But my one question, maybe more of a parks question. So you had that one slide where you had the little box at the bottom that said, well, this doesn't apply to any active applications. Of course, if those applications are withdrawn, then it would apply to those properties should any new application be forthcoming. My question would be, what would be the effect on those active applications if council were to deny them when they come to us? Would then they be subject to this, or would they get would they still be grandfathered in to try and get a chance to fix it.
I'm not sure I understand that, but let's think about it.
Yes.
Say it again.
All right. So if we could go back to that
Sure.
slide.
So if the plan on file expires,
So
We said if
they have
the,
an existing plan on file,
and it's withdrawn,
yeah,
then,
then this can
right.
jump off.
What if they have an existing plan and when it comes to council, council denies it?
You can't consider this new revision
Mm-hmm.
for a application.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not saying I'd consider it. I'm just saying what would be the effect if it were denied.
Well, I imagine we'd go,
You have to go
see somebody at the courthouse.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not,
I'm not sure effect,
Mhm.
what would the effect be? I'm not sure what you're getting at.
what would that mean if an active proposal were denied by council in term, where would the applicant go from there? Would they be subject to what was in place when they vested, or would they?
the existing standard would remain.
Whatever it was when they made their, at the time of their application.
Okay, even if it were rejected.
They would have to withdraw it, I believe,
Yeah,
Okay.
or it would have to expire.
or it would have to expire.
Okay.
Let me ask you about the lack of curb and gutter on this. We had touched on this a while back, and I know they did this around the lake, and they did this, I think it's called low impact.
Right.
Okay, and when we were having that discussion, they said that there were places where low impact was appropriate and not appropriate. And one of them was around the lake, citing it was appropriate near water because it would naturally run off. The curb and gutter sewer systems weren't as essential.
Sure.
So with this, where will these most likely be? I mean, are we positioned with what's left to pretty much have this meet that standard to be near the water, or could we end up where this was deemed inappropriate at an earlier time?
Well, all of the proposals would be on the peninsula, so the exact distance would depend on anything that's filed. So it's hard for staff to speak on exactly where that would be in light of some of the constraints offered in the presentation in terms of the land areas available. But I would offer to say that what's proposed is that nothing that would be a smaller lot where it might not be as appropriate of a solution, that would not be allowable on those smaller lots. So only for 3/4 of an acre or greater in lot size. So that would be for lots that are 80-foot wide minimum and larger in lot area overall. Yeah. So, and on the peninsula. So we would evaluate that with the developer, and it might not make sense in all cases, but the developer would be given the option if they opted to go for a larger lot size.
All right, the reason I was asking that, I recalled Morgan's Branch.
Yep.
There's
Sure.
a lot of discussion afterwards that said that was low impact application there was inappropriate. And if we had a do-over on that, we'd want curb and gutter and sidewalk.
Sure, and I think the other large factor that we did build into this ordinance amendment is that if the development or community wanted on-street parking, ditch section would not be an allowed choice. So in those tighter communities where they may anticipate visitors coming over that want to park in front of someone's residence, we would still encourage and require curb and gutter to be installed.
So in the conventional, those are going to be half-acre lots. That's what's proposed. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what's the lot size in the cluster? Because they look substantially smaller.
Sure, so those would be the same standards that we have today. So 55-foot wide lot width, although we don't have a square footage minimum in terms of lot size. That's established only for the conventional lot. And that is in order to be able to provide and maximize the amount of available open space and clustered open space for those developments. They still have to meet all of the setback requirements for that lot and prove that they can do that, though, for the cluster developments.
And Jim, with regard to your comment that you wish they had been different, I was not going to bring it up, but I will tell you what happened after the 1995 code. The mayor at that time dissolved the entire Planning and Zoning Commission, or board, and put in developers. And so you had a lot of adjustments made that had us go the wrong direction. So we're still recovering from that even now. So that your wish was unfortunately not the command of the powers that were in power at the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd point out, in your definitions, if you're if you're in chapter 2 definitions, if you're organizing them in alphabetical order, you put conventional development in the wrong place.
Thank you for that note. I will make that adjustment
Okay.
before we upload.
All right.
Tiffany, one quick question. Conventional developments with these half-acre lot size, you're giving them a 20% reduction in open space requirements.
That's correct.
What kind of impact does that have on the community? I mean, I get the general math is that, okay, they have larger lots, they have their own open space.
Yes.
But is there any real impact in that reduction? I mean, is there going to be a negative impact?
That's probably an opinion question.
Sure.
In terms of that. And it's really a matter of how City Council prioritizes those and how we look at that. Because one of the things that we, just looking across other municipal regulations, noted is that where you have a lack of HOA type of amenity, a lot of times those communities and those residents are going to utilize our local parks, right? And so there might be more wear and tear on our park and rec that's nearby that proposed development just because they can't utilize something within their own community. That being said, people within HOAs that have amenities are still going to utilize our local parks. But I would be mindful that if we are promoting reduced open space in a neighborhood, that we should be investing in our parks.
Do you have any more questions? All right, nobody signed up for public hearing, so that's a good thing. But
Well, I mean, not. Well, I guess in terms of ending the meeting soon, but we certainly don't want to discourage public participation.
I will move to come out of public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, consider the approval of an ordinance for TA 2022.06, density on the peninsula, text amendment to reduce the density of development on the peninsula and incentivize increased lot sizes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
I
Very
would.
good.
I would also make a motion that this proposed text amendment is reasonable and in the best interest of the public because it aligns development regulations with supporting infrastructure needs and is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan and land use, community character, and infrastructure.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Tiffany. All right. Reports.
Yeah, you have various reports that are from the Downtown Belmont Development Association Board Report, the Main Street Advisory Board Report, the Board of Adjustment Report, Environmental Sustainability Board Report, and Planning and Zoning Board Report. These are, of course, draft minutes and have not been approved by these advisory boards at this time.
All right.
In your packets for information.
Okay. Other business. Wanna go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I haven't gone first in a while.
Yes, it usually picks me.
It's usually always Mark. And everything's
Shaking things up a little.
Just to reiterate, again, just kind of with the fire thing, I know that we have notes down. Just want to see that report as soon as possible. I don't have much. I will say this. I was given the privilege, or I asked to do this, and the police department was so kind to allow me to do this. 2 weeks ago, Friday night, on the last Friday Night Live, I did a ride-along with one of our officers, Officer Dunlap, the DWI officer, from 9:30 p.m. to 6 in the morning.
Ooh.
And
That'd be
I
fun.
will say,
And did you not fall asleep?
I did not. The adrenaline was going. I will say our officers do an absolute amazing job. And, sometimes it's easy for us to paint Belmont as this beautiful place, which it is. But, that's all in part of our first responders and our officers, our fire departments. They're out there making it this beautiful place. So if you do have the opportunity to do that, I'm sure Chief Falls will hook you up. He did ask me to extend the offer to everyone else. If you so choose to do 9:30 p.m. to close to 6 a.m., that's your discretion. I did set the bar, so that is one shift though. So I will say, it is quite eye-opening to see what goes on at night in Belmont. So
Were you in the seedy underbelly of Belmont?
It was, Arthur, I was just telling them how appreciative I was for you guys allowing me to participate in that ride along that night into the early morning.
I want to see the call logs.
Did you ride with Arthur?
It wasn't, no. It was Officer Dunlap, but it was quite a busy night, I can tell you that. So that is all I have for tonight.
I'm going to live vicariously through you for that. I would like to, someone asked me what was happening with the trolley, and I told them I wasn't 100% sure. We hadn't had an update in a while, so maybe we could have a trolley update in the near future and find out where we are with funding, process, etc.
Were we not supposed to get were we not supposed to
Periodic,
get periodic reports from them, like a quarterly review or something?
Yes. I don't think we've
I'll
had
make
one in a
sure.
while.
I'll see to that.
Okay.
Between the cracks, kind of fell.
Well, I'll take responsibility for that.
Now, and I want to touch on, we can't address the public commenters, but I'm going to touch on what was said about us and the ordinance on the apartments. I mean, I want the public to know that that was not frivolous or did not take some deliberation to arrive at that decision. It was the second time it went around through council. There are broader issues in play other than diversity of housing. We touched on some of them tonight. We are very choked on our peninsula. Choice in housing is a good thing, and that is one part of the picture that we looked at to arrive at this decision.
Yeah.
So this was not flippant or arbitrary. This took some consideration and looking at the entire issue in the area, not just simply choice in housing. Now, we did recognize choice in housing, and we are addressing that through the missing middle and bringing those options in to fill the gap. Now, that said, when we took up this ordinance, we knew that we would have to revisit it retroactively and adjust some of the language to accommodate certain needs. Everyone knew that going in. That's not new. So we are where we intended to be, and we are moving forward as we intended to move forward. So I just wanted to redress that comment. Someone ran an idea by me. I don't know. They say it's taking place in other cities, and I don't know the legality or if it's even a thing. But they said, it kind of ties into what we discussed tonight, having an enterprise fund manager or administrator to assume a lot of the responsibilities which are delegated out throughout our staff. The effect of that would be, the 50-50 split would be negated entirely or somewhat, and you would have one person with one salary. There's a lot of money going out of this enterprise fund with these, the combination of the salaries. And I understand the justification, but I also understand the effect that it's having. What we see now is where we are now is not sustainable. So things that are draining money out of that account, whether it's salaries or whatever, I think need to go under review and see if this model is still the model that we want to maintain. Because right now, the way things are going, we can survive for 2 years by doing nothing, but we're ultimately faced with raising our water rates. As with taxes, I look to reduce the pressure on the taxpayer or the citizen, not just on taxes, but also for water. So whether that is a thing or not, I don't know, but I would like to find out. That's all I have.
Okay, Jim.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank Kevin Kraus and Jared for all of their efforts with the LGC. I mean, we're happy that we got the result, but that was through a lot of effort, Herculean effort, and behind the scenes machinations, if you will, to get us where we needed to be. So they really went above and beyond in order to get us over the finish line, and so we really appreciate that we can finally put that sordid tale to bed and get the documents filed tomorrow morning, I guess. So thank you for all of that. Those efforts that people probably will never know and perhaps never should, but we thank you for that. Are we doing board candidate interviews soon? Okay. Yeah.
Monday.
Yes.
We moved it back to before the July regular city council. So those would be your 2 days.
Okay.
As long as you guys are okay with it, I was going to share the second one with you.
Is there anything else? Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah. That's fine.
I know it's your favorite thing.
Well, I won't. I'm gonna pass. And the other topics on the agenda obviously are going to be the budget finalization, and are we meeting with the Main Street folks in June, or is that coming up at another time?
Yeah, I think we've got a list of like 2 pages worth of items we need to bring to council. We're trying to strategize on where to place them all.
Because I think the Environmental Sustainability Board wants to meet with us too. Yeah, everyone wants
so
to meet
popular.
Yes. And I know, among other things, we regarding the subject of our closed session from a previous workshop, the clock's ticking on that too. So we should be mindful of that. How are things, Bill, with the lights on Main Street? I know the Duke was doing whatever Duke was going to do. How are they coming along with that?
So when I reported them for like the second time, I actually got a response back that says these actually aren't our lights; they're the city's lights. Well, I said that's news to me. I did get in touch with actually a higher up with Duke Energy's light maintenance division. So I now have a contact that's a little higher up in the chain than I was working with. They had a underground wire issue going on whenever that pole was hit. They have resolved that, but they're still working on getting to the other lights and getting the bulbs changed out.
And in fact, whose lights are they?
They are Duke Energy's lights.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Despite them sometimes telling me they're not.
Well, that's.
And I think the issue was that I don't know when those lights were installed, but it's been a number of years. The fixtures, some of them have been changed out to more modernized fixtures, and the others haven't. So I think those old fixtures, new technicians, they say, hey, we got a bunch of new guys. They didn't know the fixtures and probably said, oh, they aren't ours, and that was their response. So, but they should be getting resolved in the next few weeks.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So how many Duke technicians does it take to change a light bulb?
You don't want to name.
Well, if we're telling jokes, how many University of North Carolina students does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Ooh.
One, but he gets 3 credits for it.
Wow. Wow.
That's
okay.
like the third time
Yeah.
he's played that joke.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I see our our code enforcement officer is no longer with us, but I was happy to see in the code enforcement report it looks like there's actually been some progress on the infamous house on Cedar Street. So that's encouraging to see.
Good. Looks really good.
Yes. I will have to say, in terms of the if we're commenting on comments, I may be the lone voice in the wilderness here, but I would my opinion would be consistent with the unanimous opinion of the planning board. I understand what the rest of my colleagues are trying to do, but I still think It's easy. We already had the flexibility built in, and you can't. I think it's not efficient to have expect a text amendment to be planned and drafted every time a one-off or an unintended consequence comes along. I would have continued to adhere to the flexibility that was already built in by requiring conditional zoning. I don't believe there's, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, much danger of putting a bunch of apartments on the peninsula regardless. I don't think apartments are allowed in GR, and most of the peninsula would either be GR or SR. And so I don't think it would have been permissible there under current zoning to begin with. But I don't see much appetite to change course, but I remain the lone voice in the wilderness on that. And I would, how's our rec center opening coming along? I want to make sure that our costs are not skyrocketing on that. So,
Zip, you want to come and give a report on the rec center?
Our code enforcement officer is still with us. She's just not
yes.
Yes. For the record, she's still with us.
Oh, I'm
Do you
sorry.
do you need Jamie to report?
What exactly?
I just want to see how I know there was an opening ceremony.
Yeah.
We had some discussion about
Jamie and I are on that committee.
the
That's why
money,
she
and we
said
want to
she
make
didn't
sure.
report.
I think some of us that we are
Well,
not.
how much is it, right?
Yeah, I mean, how are we?
So it is going very well. We are monitoring costs.
Oh, good.
So we are cognizant of that. There are going to be a lot of activities. We've gotten a lot of community partners involved. I heard today from the Charlotte Hornets that will have some of their dance team members coming, and hopefully maybe some of their other sides.
The honeybees, or do they still call them that?
The honeybees and their hip hop crew.
Oh, wow.
So they're going to be there. And
What about those drum guys from the Panthers?
we've got a lot going on.
Yes.
You missed council for a while, didn't you?
Yeah.
So we are, like I said, partnering with a lot of our community, like some of our downtown business owners and some other business owners in the area too that can come in and offer their services to make the event even better. So we are meeting with our team tomorrow about logistics and talking about parking and things like that. And then we will give an update to the committee the following week. And we're just trucking away.
So
Do you
what
have
is
any
the,
other
I didn't hear a
questions?
total. What is the total proposed, or the,
So I was told 12, but not to go over 15.
where are we at right now?
We're under 12. So we are managing costs very well.
And our final committee meeting is next Wednesday, right?
Yes.
To
Yes.
finalize everything.
I think you guys will be incredibly happy with what it is. So staff has worked very hard to put it together, so we're very excited. Hope you guys all have it on your calendars to be in attendance. So.
We'll be there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm done.
What's next, John?
Charlie, you have anything?
Yeah, pray for Donald Trump
What?
with this stuff he's got going on.
Do you have anything else before it gets my turn? That's what we're saying then.
No.
Okay. Two things. Bill, if you would check with Waste Pro, I do not want to see my recycle dumped into the same truck as the trash.
They do that this week, or?
Not this week. It was maybe a week or so ago. It might have been Memorial Day weekend time and stuff, but I still, if we're paying for that service, I don't want to see that happening.
Yeah, just the record. Sometimes they have to do that if it's problems with the Mecklenburg recycle facility. They can't accept it, but they normally notify us when that happens. So I'll check. Maybe that driver made a mistake.
Yeah, okay, because it's not, I didn't want to see that.
Yeah, that's why I asked timeline.
Yeah,
I'm like, if
I
it was
think
recently, they should.
I think it was Memorial Day weekend.
Okay. Yeah, they never
because-
notified me of that.
Okay.
So that sounds wrong.
All right, thank you. The other thing, Tiffany and I went to the Carolina Thread Trail presentation, the all-day program. It was excellent. We're missing opportunities here. I sent, I think, everyone the Greenville link so you can see what they're doing and what effect greenways have on tourism. The other part, we've talked about funding. Both county and Belmont Travel and Tourism should be putting money into these because that's the very typical model that's being used now. So we need to be pushing from that part of it. The other thing that was particularly interesting to me, we have a huge representation all across the county coming from here because they started here. And so, of course, everybody was really impressed with our rec center, but we had a huge representation. The other piece of it that was interesting to me is that the definition of transportation now is not what you and I think of it as. They talk about highways, sidewalks, the bikeways, greenways, and blueways. All of that is transportation. So we're looking at it still, I think, as fun stuff and not necessarily needs, but we're missing some opportunities here long term if we don't put the greenway piece together with the botanical garden, the Whitewater Center, and that kind of thing to really increase the tourism piece of it. So Michael Applegate went as well. So at some point we'll need to have him come talk because he'll do a better job on that than I am about why. But it was interesting for me, and I think for Tiffany as well, to hear and see what they've done in Charlotte. Okay, that's all for me.
Okay.
I'd just like to thank Kevin and Jared for their work on the budget this year. Well, and the audit and everything else, but you already got thanked for that. So I'll thank you for the budget. I think this is the best budget process we've had in a while. So thank you for that. And then I'll just echo what Richard said about the apartments amendment. I don't know that there's necessarily, I think characterizing certain things as unanticipated is not exactly accurate, given that there was a plan that was announced when we adopted this amendment that involved updating our comprehensive land use plan and then going back and amending the text amendment as necessary. You know, there's a lot going on in the city, and I don't know that the planning board spending a lot of time going back and forth with us on this is necessarily very productive. But that's my 2 cents on that. I know we had also discussed at one point providing some sort of suitable thank you to Barry for his time here. I don't know if we ever did that or. He might show up. Okay.
Kind of weird because we were thinking he was going to be here for one more meeting, and then Miles was able to come earlier, and so he was going to have to be here for that one. And then
can we trick him into showing up? Like, do we still owe him money for something? I mean,
yeah. When I said it to him, he told me he might show up.
Okay. Well.
So I can try to plan it for the July meeting and see if he'll come.
Well, we may have to be happy with the fact that he was a runner for Keep Belmont Beautiful and got us some money. So we may have to be happy
true.
with that.
That's true.
We did get him on that one.
Okay. Well, he was a big help, I think, while he was here, and he didn't have to do it. It would be very easy to say no. So I just think it, to the extent that it is possible and he's cooperative, expressing our thanks to him would definitely be a good thing.
I will reach out and see if
Okay.
That's it.
You done? All right. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.